Okay, so we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. Has everybody had coffee yet? Everybody awake? That's not an awake crowd, right? That's a sleepy crowd. Are you guys awake? Ah, good. Okay. I'm awake, clearly. I'm shouting in a microphone a bit too loud. So next up, we're going to have a panel for you, and we're going to discuss a few things. We're going to discuss the future of software development, and we're going to try and figure out where this is going. So I'm going to invite on stage with me a few people. First off, I can't read it like that. I am going to invite, there we go, Lucian Ghinda. He's co-founder at Dev Academy. He's one of the two co-founders, and Dev Academy is a non-formal learning program which focuses on innovation and practical learning. So come on stage. And yeah, next up I'm going to invite Jorge Diaz, who is a DevOps engineer at Zing. He's originally from Venezuela, but I'll let him introduce himself a bit further later on. And then finally I'm going to invite, and I'm going to totally ruin his name, Ali Kheyrollahi. I'm not sure if he's here already. Oh, there he is. He's coming all the way from the back. He's a solutions engineer at ASOS.com. And I'm going to let him introduce himself a bit further as well. So give them all a big round of applause as they join us on stage. Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay, so the question that we're having is, what's the future of software development look like? And I think to put that in perspective, we gotta have to look at like where we kind of come from as a business, how we have gone from very low-level programming languages to, everybody does JavaScript now, right? That's what we're doing. So I would just give you a few minutes to introduce yourself and try and answer that question if you can.
Sure. My name is Ali. I'm kind of that kid that still doesn't know what he wants to become when he grows up. So I've been doing software development for the last 15 years, and this question is very close to my heart. I did a blog post on this specific topic a while back, and the question is, now we've come from obviously a whole host of programming languages. We started with languages, low-level languages, C, C++, and then to high-level languages, and then functional languages. But I think if we only focus on the tools and the languages that we use, I think we might be missing a point. Last few years, a few things have happened. I don't know whether, I have just by accident started looking into that, and a few things have happened. So back in 2008, if we go a bit further bit back, there were 3 scientists that back in the early 2000s, they were working on next generation of neural networks. And the funny thing is, they actually got it right. And the things that they were building was supposed to work, but no one really believed them. And what happened was they applied for, they sent papers, their papers rejected, and at the end what happened was that Google asked one of these guys to come and work for them. And you know what happened? They built the first deep network that actually was able to recognize cat. And this might not sound, a lot, but probably you've seen the similar one, which is the, how old you are. That's the one that Microsoft built. So in the future, you will see more and more of these things that you will be building. I mean, the point is that these technologies are at your fingertips. These libraries exist. Honestly, it takes 10 lines of code to do something really fundamentally revolutionary for what was like 10 years ago. And these things are there just waiting for you. So if out of all the blabbering I've done, if you want to take one thing out, this is a new time.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Jorge Diaz. I am from Venezuela and I work as a DevOps engineer in Barcelona. And well, I was kind of surprised with the question that we have today. No, it's about a bit of playing futurologist. But well, until last year, actually, I was working as a software engineer and I was building web apps. So last year, by some business needs and also personal interest, then I made this change to be working in this DevOps role, right? And DevOps, it's a kind of a hot topic nowadays. And well, some people ask, like, okay, so is it about tools? Is it about certain technologies that you introduce into your company? But DevOps is actually more about a mindset, right? It's the idea of trying to bring together developers and operations teams. So in the more traditional way of developing software, you have your development teams and they would be working on the code. And once that goes through QA and it's ready, then you would just dump it on the operations guys and say, well, make it work, bring it to the internet. That model has worked for some time, but with the rapid change on the industry, then we're realizing that it's not good enough. Now, in the recent years as well, there has been a lot of development in the area of cloud computing, and so it's now all about putting your applications in the cloud. And so as the more of the platform becomes a service and also becomes software, that introduces a change that is needed in that the developers start to have more responsibility about the functioning of their apps themselves, right? It's not just as easy as going to the ops team and say fix things when maybe you don't even have an ops team, right? And so this is one of the fundamental changes that I see that have been coming through the years, and I think they're just going to accelerate. It's the first one is this: the developers are becoming closer to operations, and then this traditional role of operators, just installing packages and the software, that is, well, basically going away. Now, on the other side, we are talking about cloud computing, right? And so when you have this cloud computing, and you have this also big tendency towards service-oriented architectures, we're no longer trying to build huge applications, but instead we're trying to build a set of services that work in collaboration. And when you have this kind of architectures, then of course it has a big impact on you as a developer, right? I mean, traditionally, you would just assume that everything is running on the same machine basically as you are, and that's it. Nowadays, when you have systems, right, and we're not just developing apps, we're developing systems, then things become, well, more complicated. We're talking about handling the distribution of things. You cannot just rely on having things on your local file system. We are probably talking about distributed storage systems, right? And we also have to be more careful when programming regarding network failures or partitions, or what happens if some parts of your system are down, and how do you handle them gracefully in your application. And so I see this also as an important trend that is coming as we go into more distributed systems, that we as developers have to be thinking on how do we handle all these different situations, and well, that is a challenge by itself.
Okay, I have my mic. Good morning. My name is Lucian Ghinda, so I'm the co-founder of Dev Academy. And I knew the question from before, so I was thinking, how can I prepare for it? So I did one thing that maybe you also did. I posted a question on Hacker News. So I asked the guys there, what do you think is the future of the programmer? And when I say the future of the programmer, I'm talking about, of course, languages and what we're doing, but also what is the skill set, or what do we need to do or know in the future in order to get better at our job. So there I read, there were 70 comments or something, and they are talking back and forth, and I will try to summarize some of the things they said, but also some of my own perspectives about this. And I think regarding the future of the programmer, the first question is, where is the IT going, like a whole? And I think there are two sides or two directions. One is using different kind of materials or things in order to have more processing power. For example, we have this quantum computer. I saw last week a video about a computer made with drops of water or this kind of things. So there is a lot of technology or, I don't know, innovation in the hardware segment. And there is a lot of innovation regarding the algorithms, or let's call it in this direction, artificial intelligence. Okay, so, and regarding artificial intelligence, I think there are two things, or three. I read an article and I think it explains very well where we are now and where we want to go with this artificial intelligence. And they say there is artificial narrow intelligence, meaning an AI that is smart on a narrow field. So it knows how to solve or answer questions in a very narrow field. Then they said this is the level where we are now. We're trying to create an AI that tries to solve some questions or knows some things in a narrow field. Then they say the next level is artificial general intelligence, and this means an AI capable of doing what a human can do on the level of processing or I don't know, the smart. And then there is we're not here at the artificial general intelligence, but maybe we want to go there. And then there is the third level that is a little bit science fiction maybe now. And this is called artificial superintelligence, and means you have an AI that is smarter than all the humans on the earth. Of course, we don't know when we will be there. And one guy in the comments on Hacker News said, this is the point when we're talking about technical singularity. I mean, the point where we cannot predict anything because we don't know what will happen. Now, coming back to where the developer might go in the future, regarding what I said, I think what we are doing as developers can be also split in two segments. One is, let's call them system programmers or machine programmers. So these are the people who are creating APIs or machines or algorithms or operating systems or the things that the second category, let's call them application developers, are using what the first category is building in order to, I don't know, to solve some problems or implement some business cases or create some new UIs or, I don't know, games and other stuff. So regarding those two things, as I see where we are going as programmers can be, for the ones, regarding the artificial intelligence, for the ones who are currently, I don't know if it's a good name, systems programmers, machine programmers, I think they will need to know more about some things that maybe you're not so preoccupied now, but I can name that thing artificial intelligence psychology or behavior. This means trying to understand how an artificial intelligence is learning. We have now some things like machine learning, that's a hot topic, these days, but we have also some people preoccupied about how the learning is going and how such an AI can learn. So I think the people who are now in the operating system or low-level programming will need to know, of course, we're talking about the scientific programmers like maths, I don't know, from probability theory to all kinds of theories, category theory and so on, machine learning, but also more about human psychology or behavior or AI psychology or behavior, because they are the ones who need to create the machine that is learning. And then regarding the other category, the application developers, the one who are now creating applications, here I think we're moving to some kind of people who will become very good at defining problems. Because here is how an interaction could be with this kind of AI. Could be like this. You have, for example, I don't know, a vector or array of objects. Yeah, and this is basically how you're doing now. You create a function, let's say, to order it in some kind of way. This is how you're doing now. You're creating a function there. But how can it be with an AI? Could be like this. You define the problem to an AI, explain it like, I want you to order this thing with the following ordering, I don't know, function or method. And then the artificial intelligence should pick the proper sorting algorithm or ordering based on what you said, and then order it and give to you back the ordered vector of objects or something, whatever you have there. And of course, this is a basic thing, but imagine that in order to implement, I don't know, a new kind of web app or a social media application, or I don't know, you have an AI that knows a lot of programming things. So the thing that we will do as application developers will be, how can we define the problem in order for AI to understand it and solve it? So this is basically how I see the future in those two things. And one more thing at the end, I think also, because what we're doing is becoming more complex. I mean, I'm imagining, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I was very happy if I could solve a linear equation. Like I was happy, yeah, I have a solution with one variable there. Now we're talking about very complex systems. And there are also some small limitations that we have in our mind. How can we imagine such a complex system? And I think, I mean, I also did a paper, a study of studies about this thing. There is currently now, let's call it a domain name, brain training. I don't know if you heard about this. Did you heard about brain training? Something? Like Lumosity or this kind of things? Nobody? Okay. There is this field where they created some small games and they say it improves your memory or intelligence or things like this. In my study or in this paper, I didn't find so much scientific evidence about this. I mean, there are small improvements, but not so good. But I think this field in the future will become much more important, and maybe, I'm just telling maybe, part of a developer or programmer day-to-day will be trying to improve, I don't know, your abstract thinking or being able to iterate more steps in advance. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, thank you all for those questions, those answers to that really kind of very wide question. The thing that I see here is like we've had a few answers towards AI, we've had a few answers, but then we've had Jorge really talk about, you know, kind of the thing that we all know where we have to learn more and more programming languages as we stay in this industry. We have more and more responsibility. I think about 10 years ago, you could get away with maybe only knowing PHP, and now you need to know PHP, and you need to know how to do DevOps and JavaScript, and how to actually install Bower and do the build management and all that kind of stuff if you're doing web. And even on mobile, there's similar issues where you need to learn like 10 different programming languages. Now, where my question actually is going here is, we're seeing all these programming languages, the more and more things that as developers we kind of have to pick up. As software engineers, we need to know more and more kind of problem domains. When do you guys think we're gonna see a convergence of that going kind of back to maybe like AI taking this over from us, or, you know, this problem set kind of melting down again? Not sure who wants to answer that first.
I can answer because it's somehow in the direction that I told. I mean, of course, probably in the near future, more languages will come or will be created. But I think also some of them are trying to inspire, to be inspired from back of other languages, what other languages in the past did good and what we want to create now. But I think, talking about AI, that maybe in the future, like I said, we'll define a problem, let's say in common language like English or Japanese or I don't know, in a very structured language, kind of language, and then the AI will try to solve that thing or implement it. Maybe, I mean, we can see something like this now in this, maybe in test-driven development or behavior or driven development where you define some scenarios and then you execute them. Currently, the developer is fixing the problems, creating classes and methods and things like this. But if you have an AI that shouldn't be so smart, it can just implement the things that you need there. So I think we're not far away from that thing.
Yeah, so, well, I really don't know much about AI, and I do hope that robots don't take away our jobs. But I see it as a sign of maturity from the programming languages community, this flourishing and diversity that we're seeing nowadays. You look back maybe 10 years ago, we were actually going on a phase where we were like pruning languages, and we were trying to use the silver bullet, mainly, well, Java or .NET, and it's like one programming language to rule them all, and this kind of idea. But
JavaScript. JavaScript?
Well, we have JavaScript nowadays, and it's great because it runs basically everywhere. But I think we're seeing a resurgence on programming languages that are more specialized. I think this is as well, I think, part of this tendency of going to service-oriented architectures that is allowing us to tackle the problems with the best programming language that you have. And so we are seeing a lot of activity, for instance, with the Erlang virtual machine, and now we have this programming language like Elixir, right? And that's got lots of people excited, and there's lots of development there. We're also seeing a lot of interest in the systems programming area. So we have Golang, for instance, and we also have Rust from Mozilla, are making great advance in that area. We're seeing, well, as you mentioned before, JavaScript, right? And now you can have JavaScript in the browser, also JavaScript on the server. And there's a lot of investment going on to making JavaScript a very suitable language for the future. And as they mentioned in the talk before, we have things like SAM.js, which basically allows you to run at basically half the speed of C. That is actually really, really, really fast. And so I don't see it as a problem, but also as more as an opportunity to actually be able to choose the right tool for the right job. But of course, it will come with its challenges, especially for organizations, into how do you actually find the right talent to fulfill all this, the diversity of programming languages.
First of all, I think it's interesting, super intelligence was mentioned. Andrew Ng, he is one of the probably most prominent scientists we have. He was working for Google, now working for Baidu. And he had this to say and said, you know, I don't worry about super intelligence, means, you know, robots taking over us, as much as I don't worry about overpopulation of Mars. You know, okay, when we have sent maybe a few thousand people to Mars, you know, we inhabited Mars, and then we maybe, because to be honest, we don't even have any means of productively even discuss about these kind of things. So I think that is, I personally believe we will, for years to come, suffer a lot more from dumb robots rather than super intelligent ones. Now, in terms of programming languages, I completely agree with Jorge, and we've seen a flourishing, and this is, and you need to remember, all of this is cyclical. You know, in engineering disciplines, people have seen this. So it's cyclical. So there is a period of growth, there is a period of pruning. So I think we are on the cusp of growth, and frankly, that will have some impact in terms of like all these libraries. You know, we need to rewrite these libraries in these languages if they don't talk to the previous ones. So it has an impact, I agree, but we need to be, at least, I think people in this room need to have at least like 3 languages, which one of them probably is JavaScript. At least need to know that. And that's a given.
Awesome. So am I still allowed to learn Ruby? Is that still allowed? Yeah, okay. It's interesting how you say that these things are cyclical. I just want to pull it away from the AI discussion a bit because it's very philosophical. The other thing that we've seen over the last few years, we've seen kind of a trend from big monolithic apps to kind of service-oriented to very microservices. Do you think that's also a cyclical kind of progress, or is the next step kind of nano services running on IoT? You know, there's a Node.js server in my washing machine.
Yeah, that was something. Yeah, 5 years ago, I thought this is going to happen. You know, it hasn't happened yet, but it's very close to it. Personally, I think that we are breaking services perhaps too much, and we will do that perhaps for a few years. But you know, there is really nothing much new in microservices. There is a couple of bits which you know probably is topic for another discussion. But I would say that in the near future, what's going to happen is we'll start to, because it's all about loosely coupling, but also it's about cohesion. So we need to have this boundary. And I think with microservices being just, everyone is talking about it, I think we might go too much. And that's why Martin Fowler just recently published something about, you know, start with monolith, which I don't completely agree with, but it's exactly for the same reason. It seems like we're moving too much towards that.
Yeah, I have to agree on that one. I also read this article. And, well, the thing is that complexity is just not going to go away, right? So we're just moving complexity from one side to the other. Now, I think we're right now at the point where we're going too far into this, like you mentioned, microservices. I think when you start having way too many small services, then understanding the interactions of the system then becomes really, really, really difficult. And so, like, also coordinating how you make changes through the system, then it becomes really hard. I agree with Martin Fowler's idea is that, well, you really probably don't want to start with microservices or a service-oriented architecture if you don't really know what you're doing, right? You first have to define the boundaries within your system, and that can be even done with just a big monolith app, as long as the code is properly structured and you have the appropriate namespaces and your models are loosely coupled, then this will allow you to naturally grow into a service-oriented architecture, and you start splitting things apart as the business's needs come, right? We're talking about you want to hire more developers, you want to have more people working on the same code base, then of course these things become a natural need. Trying to start with these artificial constraints, it's like, no, I want to have a service-oriented architecture before knowing exactly what you're trying to solve, then this is surely a recipe for chaos.
Yeah, I think we are in sync now with this thing, but I can summarize it talking about low-level and application developer, that maybe if you're doing low-level programming, maybe you want in this direction microservices, or I don't know, having some very contained and constraints. But if you're solving like application, a business need or something, you go first monolith, like solve the problem, ship it, and then go back and optimize it, splitting it microservices, rewriting in different kind of languages.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to take it from here and take it to the audience. So if you guys have any questions, we'd love to know. There's probably quite a few of them. Anybody? That can't be true. Who here knows more than, you know, on a daily basis uses more than 2 programming languages? That's not true. Okay, see, there they are. Quite a few of us. Who here is doing DevOps in their company? See, increasingly amounts too. We can continue this like that. If there's no questions from the audience, then we're just going to continue like this. I have a few more questions here. Sorry, I just need to look them up. Do you think, you know, this increasing amount of languages that we see people having to learn, do you think that you know, that affects how you grow the applications down the line? Like if your app is already building on like 3 different languages from the start, does that affect the growth of the business down the line, or do you see that over time becomes consolidated into one language?
No, okay. I don't know, based on what I saw, and also I was involved in, let's say, big architecture, which had 3 programming languages, including JavaScript. I think it works, having multiple languages, and there are some cases like Twitter, who was in the beginning in one language, then they started to rewrite parts of it in other languages, because I think the trend currently is to rewrite in some directions, is to rewrite some parts in the language that fits most. But also, I think this is a healthy trend because it allows the programmers to experience or experiment with other languages. So, I don't know, you learn a little bit about Go, and then you decide, I will rewrite this part and make it a microservice in Go because I want to play a little bit with it. So I think this could be a healthy trend also from the side of, I want to dig a little bit, and I heard about Ruby. For example, last week or 2 weeks, they launched Crystal language, which is some kind of strongly typed Ruby with some things. I don't know if I want to program in it, but I will do a little bit just to know how it is.
It's been around for a while, actually.
Okay, so this is the trend that maybe I'm seeing.
So, well, this is like normally an issue in the industry. We're going a lot with fashion trends and not always making business cases. And so I think it's a responsibility as developers to choose the tools, right? And experimentation is always great, but we have to be conscious that this is something I call like first generation systems, is that, well, you're basically learning your programming language or framework, and then the end result is usually crap, and you just have to rewrite it. So I think as developers, it's our responsibility to experiment and to try and learn different programming languages and different paradigms, but we also have to be responsible when we actually choose to put these things into production code.
Yeah, I just have one thing to say, and that is, if there are companies that are doing it, namely Netflix, Amazon, so it's definitely possible. The point is, that these smaller teams, what you do is that these microservices, you define the interface, and all these other microservices talk to the interface, and then you have to change it. You just change underlying interface, stays the same. Having said that, I would agree with Jorge that companies will start to struggle to find the right talent, and it's question of dollars, it's question of money, and so that's why I think we will have a pruning coming shortly.
Awesome, you can keep that one. Still no questions from the audience? Ah, yeah, see, we have a few. Is there anybody with a roaming mic around? Yes, there they are. Cool, the microphone is coming to you. There was some hands over there. Just keep your hand up so they can see you.
Hello? So my question is mainly for Ali, because I read your article on scientific programming. I was wondering if you could give us like a definition or of what a scientific programmer is actually, because it's not pretty clear, and in what way is it different from a normal programmer or a software engineer? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I just mentioned that I blogged about this feature of programming, how scientific programming is going to influence and perhaps change it. So scientific programmer, there is a rise in scientific programmers, and this is, to be honest, it can be seen, it can be felt, and scientific programmer is someone who knows programming, right, and knows maybe a couple of languages at least, but not only that, knows about the underlying computer science of it, maybe not everything, but some of it, and is happy to go and read the algorithm and take the pain of implementing it. So that from a paper and mathematical representation can implement it. And not necessarily like 100% of the time should be able to do that, but needs to understand the algorithms and libraries and like the parameters that needs to supply, how they affect the way that machine learning libraries work. So it's like a cross-section of data scientists and just a general programmer. Does that answer the question?
So
Okay.
I'm gonna go next right here. I'm a developer for Bitdefender, and I'm gonna narrow it down a little bit, especially on JavaScript. In the last year and a little, I experimented 4 different frameworks, and jumping between them is like jungling with 4 balls at the same time and not being sure you know what you're doing with all 4 of them. Now, my question for you is, do you see any unification in this area for the future? I mean, I'm at the beginning of my journey through the programming specialization, so here I am asking what should I do next? Should I go ahead and specialize in one of these frameworks? Maybe learn JavaScript vanilla, so I might think I know everything about all of them, but what should we do next for the ones of us that are at the beginning?
So what he's asking
Thank
is,
you.
Can he go on holiday, or will he miss out on the next 5 JavaScript frameworks?
So, well, I would say like this is just from my personal experience. Well, you should just learn JavaScript and really, really, really understand JavaScript. Then when you learn the frameworks, they all tend to be different in their implementations, but most of the ideas, they tend to stick around, right? So I think it's important job-wise to specialize and to be really good in a particular framework. Which one to choose depends on your community. It's important the local community, and also I would say the prospect of finding a job working in this particular framework. but always keep an eye on what is out there. Even if you're not proficient on any of the other frameworks, keeping an eye on them, maybe try a weekend project or doing a hackathon in something different. But I think specialization is definitely important. And then even more important is to get the basics right, and so to really understand your programming language, and then changing frameworks will take some time, but if you have the fundamentals right, then it won't be so hard.
So two things. At the web stage, there will be two presentations about two frameworks. I don't know if they are amongst what you are telling. Then the second, like almost a joke, JavaScript already has document get element by ID, so I think that's nice. I agree with Jorge, like I think frameworks will come and go. Maybe some of them are staying mature, they are writing the second version or the third or things like this. And from just adding what Jorge said, I think it's underlying the need to really understand JavaScript, because it has a lot of things in it and you can do a lot with the language itself. And then the second, some of the frameworks I think are good as a coding style, or it just provides a framework how you can organize the code. And maybe, or at least this is how I started to see the frameworks lately. I see them is the way this framework makes me put the code in some files, directories, and so on. How you think about what you're trying to solve. Does it fit the application or my own style, and which one can be?
Okay, awesome. We're going to have to wrap it up here, I'm afraid. So give them all a big round of applause and thank you for your time.